Hello and welcome back, everyone. I have not done a book review just singular on my page so far. This is going to be the start of my brutal book report series, hopefully, where we just kind of dissect the major literary components of books, whether or not I like them, and then give it an average score. So the 5 categories I will be grading the books off of is 1, plot and structure, 2, writing and prose, 3, setting and world building, 4, characters, character arc, character development, that kind of thing, and 5, themes/overall messaging. With these literary devices, I will be ranking them 0 through 5, 5 being the most incredible piece of literature I've ever read, 0 being the book could burn, and I wouldn't care. Our first book on the chopping block is House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. Now, this was a pretty short book. I found it to be really enjoyable because it had elements of a thriller, mystery, very gothic setting, so let's get right into it. This is a little bit of a spoiler warning. I will try to refrain from any groundbreaking details for those of you who haven't read it. Let's start with the plot and the plot structure. This is the kind of book I could see being turned into like an indie film or just some kind of movie and it be done incredibly well. This had a very generic plot structure. You've got your build up to the final climax and then the resolution. It was paced out very well, in my opinion. The introduction gave us all of the info we needed in order to kind of piece together why our main character is making the choices she is. And then we get introduced to a whole new place, a whole new set of characters, and that's when the actual story begins. The plot and overall structure of the book, I gave it a 4 out of 5 because it definitely kept me enthralled throughout my reading experience. Now let's talk about the writing. I am one who really appreciates a lyrical prose, very poetic, not too fluffy because I like to have meaning in there too. But this was a very easy read. It had really good descriptor words and could put a general basic picture of what's going on in my head. The only downside, and this kind of goes with the world building just a little bit, when we get to the actual House of Hunger, because it is this giant castle up in the north, there isn't much to explain all of the different rooms that these blood maids are going to. It kind of was just like a cobblestone maze in my head for the most part. So I guess the focus was more on the characters and the final reveal of what goes down at the House of Hunger than anything. I didn't necessarily catch any editing mishaps. This book is written in third person. Honestly, the dialogue between the characters I found to be very flirtatious and interesting, and it definitely kept the story driving forward. For the writing, I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 because it wasn't the most profound thing I've ever read. Anyways, let's just keep going. World building and setting. This is a pretty short novel, and I think for all intents and purposes, the author made the world building very simplified. We have the South, where our main character grew up. The South is more of like a smoggy industrial city. I would want to say resembling Europe. That's what I imagined in my head. And then we have the North, which is sprawling open land and sparsely populated with these houses of nobility. And our story takes place at the House of Hunger, but there are other houses as well. That is about all we get. That is kind of the overall impression I got. I would compare it to One Dark Window in terms of world building because One Dark Window was also very simplified. We are literally only in one area and we didn't get a map or anything, which honestly is understandable, and sometimes as a reader I prefer that, especially when it's a book as short as this. When it's a high fantasy such as Game of Thrones or Throne of Glass, I feel like that is more pertinent to the story, as we know the characters are going to be going on these crazy journeys to all of these random cities, and so detail is pretty important. For world building and just the overall setting, this book was very gothic, Renaissance, Victorian era with how she described the clothes, because that was one of the major points of description rather than the place itself. The major colors of this house are red, black, and white. Left a lasting impact on me in terms of the world building. And so for that, definitely gave it bonus points because I'm a lover of any gothic literature. For the setting and the world building, I gave it a 2.5 out of 5. Not the greatest, not the worst. You know, happy middle ground. Just speaking personally, characters either make or break a series for me. You can have the coolest, most awesome, crazy writing, setting, storyline, but it's that connection with the characters that I think is really important to readers. So let's get into the characters. I briefly touched on our main character, Marion. She was born and raised in the South, and she has been worked like a dog day in and day out to try and afford her little shack, from how the author described it. And she is sick of it. She is sick of it. She is driven to become a blood maid for the nobility in the North. No one really knows exactly why blood maids are needed, but it is very, very frowned upon in the South. It kind of, I would say, is on par with like saying you're like a... So Marion decides, on a risk, on a whim, to go and become a blood maid. Now, what we know of Marion's character in the very beginning is she's kind of more of a nonchalant person. She has had lovers in the past, but she's never really had a connection with them. Truly, she doesn't seem to have like a sense of loyalty to anyone or anything. That's why she's grabbing all her stuff and getting out of town. I didn't really connect with Marion's character, but there are other characters who are introduced later on in the novel that I thought were really well done in terms of just driving the plot. We meet the lady of the House of Hunger, the Countess, and she was arguably one of my favorite characters with how she was written. She's very mysterious, she's very hot and cold. She really made the story into something awesome. Whereas Marion's character, towards the end, kind of falters in terms of logic for me. The opinions she held at the beginning of the book switched very rapidly, which is something I don't necessarily favor without the proper fluff to back it up. So that was the only drivel I had with this. Yeah, so for characters, I gave this book a 3 out of 5. And finally, we have themes / overall messaging. One of the major themes, which I feel like has been done in a lot of other novels, is the 1% or the rich taking advantage of the poor to save their own skin. I don't necessarily think there was any underlying life-changing message to this book, but that doesn't mean it wasn't good and I didn't enjoy it. I would say another theme or message in this book is truly, what would you do for a check? Yeah, also, I think another underlying theme, because this had more of a sapphic tale to it, is just kind of trusting your gut and not letting rose-colored glasses skew your view of how the world is. One thing about Marion's character, she definitely kept her wits about her, and aside from breaking almost every single rule in the house, that ultimately helped her in a lot of different ways. So for just the overall themes and messaging, I give it a 3 out of 5. I think this was a really enjoyable read for how short it was. It definitely got me in the mood for spooky season, even though I know it's over. So I have added everything up, and our average score for this novel was a 3.2 out of 5 stars. Pretty great middle ground for a book I enjoyed, but nothing that was necessarily life-changing. If you're looking for a quick gothic sapphic read that has a lot of darker vampire-esque elements to it, I would definitely pick this up. Thank you guys for enduring my first brutal book review, and see you next time.